Hey guys, this is McTodgic, and welcome back to another episode of the Translucent Plastics Archive. Today's episode is going to be a little bit short because there's not too much to say, except that I'm talking about stationery. Now, the examples that I've got in front of you now are from the early 2000s, but the thing about stationery, which is part of the reason I don't need to say too much, is that you can still find translucent stationery products today. There are a few categories of product where the translucent trend came and actually stuck and stayed with the products long after the late 90s and have continued to this day. One obvious example would be in beauty and healthcare products. You can find translucent plastics used all the time, especially in anything related to bathroom, shower, shampoo, that kind of thing. You'll find a lot of accents, especially hand soap is a very common one where you'll find translucent plastics still used, I suppose because the aesthetic design in general has a bit of a resemblance to water or to, a sort of liquidy sense of flow. So I suppose that's why they get used on those packaging. And in stationery, well, of course, the translucent plastics thing, it was always very colorful and vibrant design aesthetic, especially with the fruit colors of iMac in 1999. So for that reason, stationery has always been popular with kids, of course, for school. And so what I'm showing you today is just some examples from the early 2000s that I myself collected back then, obviously not knowing that this trend was going to die, just because. So one example here is a collection I've got of different textures, and these are just very simple, and they're not fully translucent as you can see, but they do have a little bit of a luster to them, which I suppose at least on modern textures you don't tend to find something like this. Another thing you don't tend to find very often on textures today is another element of Y2K, which you can't see through the screen, but I can tell you about, and that is the multi-sensory element of these products. You see, these are not just regular textures, but they actually have a scent. So each one is flavored in a different way. When you open it, and you can actually sniff, the different textures, they have a really nice scent. Each one is a different kind of fruity flavor. We've got a chocolate here. I think this is licorice, if I remember correctly. So chocolate, yeah, and a few other ones here. They're all really nice. Actually, not that I'm a kid anymore. I'm not an expert at this anymore. But these are some of the best smelling textures I've ever had, and they still smell strong. They're still really great when you open them and have a sniff. I'm not like an addict or anything, but I thought I'd just mention that because in the Y2K era, the late 90s I'm talking about, there wasn't just an explosion of color, but there was an explosion of sensory overload in every sense. I mean, if you look at the kids' lollies that were coming out at that time, there were the most popular ones were bursting with sourness. There were extreme sour varieties that no one would have dared sell in the past, but now were really popular. And with the scent, people were creating these wild and wacky scents. Lollies, confectionaries of all kinds were getting really outlandish and trying to be better and bigger and more sour and more sweet and all those sorts of things. So the sense of texture is just another example of that. And this is actually done by Faber-Castell, so I suppose more of a distinguished brand now, but they made stuff like this as well. Now what I have here is a few other things. This one I got from a gift shop. It's a very mini little calculator. The cool thing about it, which I haven't seen on any other calculator, is the door, which is really nice and kind of makes it feel like a bit like a cell phone once you're actually using it. They have really tiny buttons. These are, I had a thing for tiny stuff, and my tiny hands back then were able to actually use it, but nowadays, not quite. This one doesn't turn on anymore. I think maybe I should get in there and fix the battery at some stage and see if it still works, but yeah, it's just a general basic calculator. And it's got a little door on it. I got this for about $5. The other cool thing, which I haven't mentioned about translucent plastics, one of the reasons I like it is that it's actually really, it's really cheap. A lot of it's very affordable stuff. So if you're looking to collect these, maybe some of them not so common now, do cost quite a bit. But if you do want something in particular, it's actually quite cheap. They're made of plastic, of course. They were never intended to be luxury items. And so, I think there's something really nice and I suppose democratic about collecting something that isn't particularly prestigious or luxurious, but just everyday common items that you like the look of. This here was part of a set of miniature stationery equipment. Again, when I was a kid, I used these because they were so small. I really liked them. We've got some stuff like something that can pull out staples, stapler, hole punch for, yep, they all work fine, and a pair of scissors. And this is just one little example. I mean, back when you were growing up in these days, back in the 90s, everything was translucent, really. I mean, you could easily find whatever you wanted in whatever color you wanted. And sadly, that's no longer the case. You have to go out and look really hard. One place I've been going to recently to find some translucent stuff is Daiso, Japan, which is pretty good, but not quite the same design language as this. You can see this is a very vibrant color palette here. I suppose you could get whatever color you wanted, but you couldn't really get muted minimalist colors like you can today. In fact, I'll just get a Daiso box so I can show you what I mean. So Daiso Japan is still making translucent products. Here's an example. It's a cup. Just a gentle blue, but it's really quite nice. It's really nice. It does remind me of the 90s. And here's a box that they make as well. It's just a very gentle, translucent blue. I like that because sometimes you want a box where you can actually see what's inside. If it's too dark in color, then you can't really see. But if you've got just a gentle blue box, yeah, perfect. Like, that's really nice. Daiso is one of the few companies that still makes things like that. Yeah, but anyway, that's stationery, and I hope you enjoyed that. And stay tuned, because we're going to be showing off some more translucent products in the coming weeks.